is the DeFi Decoded podcast by 9 Point Partners in cooperation with Prophecy DeFi. The ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast should not be taken as investment advice. Always consult with your financial advisor before investing.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of DeFi Decoded. My name is Alex Tapscott. I'm here with co-host Andrew Young. We've got a great show for you today. We are joined by Peng Zhong, who's the CEO of Tendermint. Peng leads a world-class team that builds applications to improve the usability, accessibility, and safety of blockchain for developers and end users. Tendermint as a name is probably familiar to many of our crypto native listeners. They're a core contributor to the Cosmos ecosystem, a ecosystem that we've spent some time discussing on the podcast. And for good reason. It houses more than 250 blockchain projects and secures over $100 billion in digital assets, and projects on the Cosmos ecosystem in general that use the Tendermint consensus mechanism include Binance Chain, Terra, Crypto.com, ThorChain, Osmosis, Kava, Fetch.ai, Injective Protocol, Persistence, Akash, Regen, and many more. So we're really delighted to have Peng on the show. He joins us from where exactly? You're in Toronto.
From Toronto, right? That's right.
So it's an all Toronto podcast. So excuse us if we use some hockey analogies. But anyway, thanks for joining the show, Peng. Andrew and I have a ton of questions for you. As you know, the audience is sort of a mix of crypto native and traditional finance people, and even those who are new to all this stuff. So should be a great discussion. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about your journey into the world of blockchain and DeFi? How did you get your start?
Yeah, so I like to read Hacker News back in the day. I don't any longer, but it's sort of where I got tech news, and that's where I started hearing about Bitcoin. I think years ago, maybe even 2011, 2012, when Bitcoin was around $1, I started hearing noise about Bitcoin, about how this community-run currency was really cool, and I, disregarded it because I thought, some sort of fun experiment. Not really interested. But the next point I heard about it, also on Hacker News, was when Bitcoin crossed $100, and I was like, okay, at this point, there's really something really here. They talk about entire communities, buying and selling and using Bitcoin to purchase coffee and also the random household goods. And I thought, you could actually do something with Bitcoin. I would love to have some Bitcoin, and I bought some. Unfortunately, I don't have anywhere near how much I used to have, but just the idea of cryptocurrency and accessible currency that is governed by a community and not by any centralized government was super appealing to me. Someone who's been fairly familiar with digital currencies in gaming, primarily gaming. So I came from a banking background, and I thought, what better way to bring gamification to the real world than currency like this. I started listing my services. Back then I was a front-end developer and designer for Bitcoin on something called like a Bitcoin wiki back in the day. And I got several interested parties who were interested in having me, build a website and pay me Bitcoin. Unfortunately, none of them really panned out, but I was always interested in getting closer to cryptocurrency at that point. So Jaquan reached out to me. I worked with him previously on a startup as a contract front-end developer for a software as a service product.
Jaquan, the co-founder of the Cosmos Network.
Right. The co-founder of the Cosmos Network, someone I met in 2010 in, not in person, but I met his team in San Francisco, and they needed my help to build a website, help them build a website. And when it came to Jaquan in 2014, he was looking to build a centralized exchange actually. And he needed help with the front end. So, I chipped in, helped out with this front end of a centralized exchange called Fort Knox, which I believe never really saw the light of day. But at that point, it was something that Jay was already very much into. And when it came about time for design and front-end resources to be needed for Tendermint Inc., he emailed me, and I was brought on as the first employee. And that was in late 2015, actually. So I've been with Tendermint, the company, since before Cosmos was a project. And I've seen it grow from 3 people to over 100 people today.
Amazing. And I think in 2015 was the first time that I learned about Cosmos when Jay Kwan and Ethan Buckman, who we had on the podcast earlier, were actually presenting to this group at the University of Toronto called the Creative Destruction Lab, which is basically this real life Dragon's Den where entrepreneurs would pitch their idea to a bunch of typically gray-haired, investors who had built and sold companies. And I remember hearing them explain the vision for Cosmos in 2015, and it fell on deaf ears. Unfortunately, all these people didn't really understand the idea of, building capability on these decentralized networks. They were used to sort of companies. So it was like, well, what's your IP? Well, we don't have any, it's open source. Well, like, what's your competitive advantage? It's like, well, community. And it's like, well, what are you talking about? All this stuff. And anyway, within a year, Cosmos had raised money in what was a really groundbreaking crowdfunding campaign. And today is worth $8 billion and supports that ecosystem of apps that I named. So it's really remarkable that by 2015, you'd already been in this space for 4 years and had seen your fair share of ups and downs. And even at that point, it was so early that most people really had no idea what was going on. I think Andrew was still in high school when that was going on. So just interesting to see how far things have come. So Tendermint, let's just sort of disambiguate here for a second, because there's the Tendermint consensus mechanism, right? And then there's the company Tendermint. Now, the two are the two the same thing? How does that work exactly? And what do you see as the role of Tendermint?
Yeah, so the two are quite different things. Tendermint, the company, was named after the consensus protocol that has its name, right? The Byzantine fault tolerant, 2/3 of voting power needs to vote for a new block before it becomes, the next block in the blockchain protocol. And that protocol underlies all Cosmos technology, underlies 100 billion plus of digital assets that, Alex said Cosmos ecosystem secures today. And it's a consensus protocol that is even used by non-Cosmos projects, right? The likes of Polygon and Tezos also use modified versions of Tendermint Core consensus to power their blockchains. So Tendermint Core has been extremely influential in crypto, and it's really one of the more simple protocols for consensus, which is why it's so widely adopted. Here at Tendermint, things are quite different. We don't focus as much on core consensus mechanisms. When Jay Kwan, the founder of Cosmos and Tendermint, stepped down in 2020, I was appointed CEO. So now I've been, leading Tendermint Inc. now for about a year and a half. And we have quite a different focus that's meant to focus on the ecosystem, but also find ways to leverage, my strengths as a designer, front-end developer, and what I know the ecosystem needs at this point in time, right? So the core tech stack has been fairly successful, right? $100 billion, nothing to... Anyway, what I'm trying to say is the technology is good, but there are still very few projects and very few people who know about Cosmos. I think what you'll find in all crypto ecosystem today is that there's a lot of capital floating around and moving into various protocols. There's huge amounts of total value locked and such, but they're primarily coming from a small number of people. The accessibility of crypto, the accessibility of DeFi is still really not there. Part of that, you might argue, for both DeFi and NFTs on, the most commonly well-known ecosystem today, Ethereum, is just the transaction fees. Transaction fees are a huge blocker. You can spend a day maybe trying out DeFi on Ethereum, you end up with 1 ETH less than you started with, which is not a good feeling when it might take you, a few years to recover that just from yield rewards. So you'll have to be, very well capitalized to enter the Ethereum ecosystem today. But here I am looking at what's happening right now, the amount of interest in crypto, and I do feel like we have a long ways to go from it, like a really long ways to go in terms of accessibility. So that's always been my focus here at Tendermint Inc., which is to bring on more people to the Cosmos ecosystem and more developers building new chains with Cosmos technology. I think that there's definitely a fear from me that, well-capitalized entities are going to take over the space because they have such a big head start right now. And I want to ensure that this is technology that is, meant to be democratic, and people who have less capital, maybe more time, right, are able to dive into this new technology, learn how it works, build something on their own. And it's something that was possible in Web 2, right? You have these developers learning new front-end stacks and web application frameworks in their free time, be able to build businesses, billion-dollar businesses, the likes of Uber and Airbnb and Netflix today were built on the backs of these sort of people. So I want to make sure that's still possible today, even though we have, highly valuable protocols already. I want to ensure that, people can continue to build these valuable, things that we have in Web 2 on Web 3 without needing a lot of upfront capital to start with.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I totally agree with your sort of point on accessibility. How do you guys think about accessibility? Do you sort of spend time building your own projects, or do you more focus on supporting projects that are building using the Tendermint consensus?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. So we do a lot of everything, probably a little bit too much. But the idea is, we have this great technology, the Cosmos SDK, which powers over $100 billion worth of assets. But there's still only a small number of chains. There are only about 250 blockchains that are using this technology, and only about maybe 35 or so that have real world value currently. So we're at a very early stage in the Cosmos ecosystem, and there's a lot of growth ahead. So how we approach improving our technology for the masses is we dog food our own tech, right? So we use the Cosmos SDK ourselves, and we incubate various projects within Tendermint and also outside of Tendermint. So both we take a hands-on approach and help guide projects from idea to mainnet internally, which is more high effort. And we also have a more low touch, low effort approach through Tendermint Ventures, where we invest in projects, generally with more senior talent. Maybe they have had experience with the Cosmos SDK previously, and help ensure that they have the capital they need and connections they need to launch a successful project.
That's awesome. So what are some of these some of the most exciting projects that you guys are sort of helping out, either kind of in the low touch side or developing in-house?
Yeah, so two of our internal flagship products are Emrys and Starport. So what Emrys is meant to be this mainstream DeFi portal that onboards as many people as possible into the Cosmos ecosystem, teaches them why Cosmos is important, right? So in comparison to other ecosystems, where generally you have this one coin that you're promoting, and you're encouraging people to have, maybe you're giving away the token, et cetera. In Cosmos, there are many, many tokens. And, I'd argue that many of them are valuable, right? So instead of a token to gather a community around, it's more, educating them about this vision, about this interchain vision, cross-chain vision that's meant to be really the most scalable way to access crypto. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, every single successful blockchain project, it's going to run into the same issues as Ethereum is today, if not worse, as more and more people join the ecosystem. Transaction fees rise, blocks, become overfull, and congestion starts happening. So with the idea of this interoperability protocol called IBC, right? You're meant to always be able to scale horizontally. If your chain ever fills up with users or transactions, or disk space even, you can shard your blockchain, split it into two, have another one running the exact same software, move half your users over to that. And, you can see a future where some of the most popular Cosmos DeFi protocols are not one chain, but instead 100 different chains that communicate to each other and settle balances, let's say every week or so, or every month. And that way you're able to serve more people with lower transaction costs, but all of them at the same time.
Yeah. An analogy that I heard recently, and I'd be curious for your perspective on it, was that Ethereum, and I think maybe Andrew was actually the one who shared this, but basically Ethereum's plan to scale is to take their existing big computer and to make upgrades to it to make it run more effectively. And other layer one protocols like Solana and others are trying to start from the beginning and build a new giant supercomputer. And Cosmos is actually taking a different view, which is instead of one giant supercomputer, just have tons of different computers, sort of like the model that we have today with the web. That you don't need one giant super duper computer to run all of these different applications. In fact, some of them can all run on different blockchains. Now, I understand that we're taking some creative license with the analogy, and I just want to get your perspective on, is that an accurate way to think about it?
I think that's a wonderful way to think about it. In fact, the internet is a great analogy. And what you spoke about, about how there's one giant computer that runs, let's say, all DeFi applications on a particular chain. versus the Cosmos model of multiple computers, right? It's sort of what happened with computers as a technology, right? We did have these giant mainframes in the 60s that ran, very important applications, right? And I believe back then people had terminals that were really dumb terminals where you could send commands and receive data back, maybe printed by a printer next to you. And that was how business was conducted back then. And nowadays, everyone has more than one computer. Probably you might have one on your wrist and in your pocket, and one that you're sitting in front of right now. And there are computers in absolutely everything, right? There's an Android phone in your fridge potentially, or there's a computer within your speaker. And you don't maybe think of them as computers, but they all probably run Linux, and they all speak to each other through the internet. So that seems to be a scalable model that's worked really well for us in terms of hardware. And the Cosmos is that software analogy of that, right? It's truly Web3. And I believe that, an ecosystem like Ethereum and Solana and Avalanche, et cetera, Polkadot, we're all going to end up reaching the same conclusion, right? Where there's a world of many, many blockchains. Some of them may be Ethereum, some of them may be Solana, some of them may be Polkadot, et cetera. They're all going to have to shard because, as long as the core tech is good, as long as you're able to build a community, right? You're going to have too many people for any one world computer. And I just feel like, working on Cosmos since 2015, right? We've been focused on the right thing all along. And we think all ecosystems are meant to thrive together. And IBC is a great protocol for other networks to implement because we've built the largest cross-chain ecosystem already today. And if you want to, join, then we're happy to help you connect.
Yeah, I think that's a kind of building on your point and Alex's point. I'm a firm believer in sort of the horizontal expansion versus, I'm also a believer in sort of the vertical expansion as well, but there's such a huge demand for block space. It's kind of like, as some people said, like data was the most scarce asset in the 2010s. And I think block space is going to be the most scarce asset in the 2020s. And so I think the sort of the approach of Cosmos makes a ton of sense. Why do you think, I guess, obviously Tendermint consensus is like very well trusted at this point, but we're seeing a lot of, we are a DeFi podcast at the end of the day, and we've seen a lot of DeFi adoption on Cosmos, things like Osmosis, among other projects. Why do you think DeFi projects are choosing to build using the Cosmos SDK?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think it just speaks to the core value of the Cosmos SDK, right? And one of which is sovereignty, which is that, if you have a great idea, right, you don't need to be building it on someone else's platform. You can, start this greenfield project on your own, secure it yourself, and, interact with the ecosystem on your own terms. So the Cosmos ecosystem will benefit from your new protocol. At the same time, you don't have to pay rent to any other chain in the Cosmos ecosystem for being a part of it. So that has a lot of appeal for founders, I believe. Founders generally leave companies in the first place because they're looking for more autonomy, right? They're looking for more ownership of their product. And while yes, you can get, let's say a large grant to build on Solana or, Avalanche or Polkadot, that large grant, in some ways lock you into their ecosystem, right? You're supposed to build something for them, for their user base. And, if you're building something that maybe, or if you, are pivoting away from that, then you're still a bit locked in, right? And as a founder, you prefer not to be locked in. You need to be able to move quickly and change ideas. So to have to, let's say, pay for a parachain slot on Polkadot, along with your original idea, and in the future, right, if you become successful, to be locked into that for the foreseeable future, 10 years, 20 years in the future, it's a very expensive cost. Whereas in Cosmos, right, you build something, it's wholly yours and your communities, you do exactly what you want with it. And there's no one who's ever going to be able to stop you from, making your product accessible to the entire world of all IBC-enabled chains. And that's a great feeling to have.
Seems like and also a very powerful motivator for projects who see all the upside of using Tendermint consensus and using the Cosmos SDK, and none of that sort of vendor lock-in or what have you that you might get from maybe looking at it on another protocol. But on the other hand, there is this critique of Cosmos that there's $100 billion plus of value that uses the technology, not TVL in the traditional sense, but there's this huge ecosystem of digital assets that rely on Cosmos in some form, and some of them are the most brand name blockchain projects out there, like Binance Chain or Terra. And in fact, those two projects have market capitalizations that are greater than Cosmos. So the critique is, well, why isn't more value accruing to the native token if after all this network is so valuable and everyone's using it? Where are the ways in which the native token is capturing some of that value? And what do you think are some of the ways it should do that in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I answered a very similar question earlier today, so I feel a little bit more equipped to do it right now. So first of all, in 2021, right, most chains, most Cosmos chains that is built with the Cosmos SDK and has IBC enabled, there's about 25 of them today, do rely on the Cosmos Hub, primarily for fiat onboarding and offboarding, right? The Atom token is well supported and well recognized across most major exchanges. And if you lived in a country that has less access to crypto or less access to coins, right, than other countries, right, Atom is generally still one that's widely accepted, right? So in terms of users in the Cosmos ecosystem, generally they all have to pass through the Cosmos Hub just to be able to get money, their local currency into the ecosystem, and for them to cash out, to buy something with their gains. So that's always been a core value of the Cosmos Hub. The largest validators of the Cosmos Hub, right, largest security providers of the Cosmos Hub, for the most part, are centralized exchanges as well, which means that there are a large amount of Atom token holders that are storing their coins just on Binance, just on Coinbase, just on Kraken, right? And I understand. Let's say take Coinbase for example; they only give half of the staking yield, the 5% instead of 10%, right, to their users. But for their users, the trade-off is worth it, right? Because Coinbase is fairly secure and has some insurance guarantees that you're not going to have if you were your own bank. So the Cosmos Hub has become a really good place to store your assets, and also a really great place to onboard new people in the ecosystem, which is why you're seeing throughout the course of this year there are many new projects that airdrop tokens to the Atom holder set, because that's where all the users are coming from right now. So that's not really a native use of the Atom token, but it's showing the importance of Atom right now in the Cosmos ecosystem. But going into next year, right, there are a great number of features that are being planned for the Cosmos Hub that's meant to really bolster the usage of the chain itself across the internet of blockchains. So one of which I think maybe the most hyped one right now is called Interchain security. So I mentioned earlier about how Cosmos as an ecosystem, has sovereignty as sort of its primary feature, right? So you can launch something, secure it yourself, but with that comes the trade-off that you have to find the security, right? Which means find a set of sovereign validators. And validators are very busy, overworked. And if you want to get a brand name validator, generally all brand name validators came from the Cosmos Hub originally, because we were the first sort of well-known proof of stake ecosystem. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of capital, maybe some clout, some connections, and that's not easy to do if you were to build something, a new chain in Cosmos. So what Interchain security will bring to the Cosmos Hub is the ability for validators of the hub to more quickly and easily secure the hub and secure multiple secondary chains at the same time, which will allow new chain developers to launch something quickly, to focus on business logic and the application itself, and to sort of outsource the security to the Cosmos Hub.
That's really cool. That's kind of like security as a service.
Security as a service. And you might think maybe this is similar to what the relay chain does in Polkadot, right? And it is, but there is still one major difference, right? Where in Polkadot, their cross-chain communication protocol, XMCP, right, really requires that you talk through this relay chain. Whereas in Cosmos, it's not needed to send transactions through the Cosmos Hub. So, the major difference between Cosmos and other cross-chain ecosystems right now is that the hub is not necessary, right? The ecosystem can thrive without the Cosmos hub. And that what makes the ecosystem, the most scalable as well, right? So let's look at the web today. I'm going to take this analogy as well, right? And let's consider the Cosmos hub like Google, right? All the value on the internet does not go through Google, right? In fact, the internet is valuable because there are sovereign websites and sovereign web applications that users can use, traverse, links to go between them, etc. But you don't ever have to use Google if you don't have to, right? There's even competing search engines, out there that people would prefer to use instead of Google. But what Google offers is discoverability of all these different services. So you might think of the Cosmos Hub similar to that, right? It's the sort of the landing page of the Cosmos. It's the landing page of the Internet of Blockchains. You generally need to start at the Cosmos Hub because that's how you get, that's how you get bought into the ecosystem. And from there, you can take your tokens and traverse the Internet of Blockchains.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. I think that what's really interesting about Cosmos is it's almost even beyond the technology. It's a difference in philosophy. It's just a completely different sort of philosophy to it. It's more focused on value creation versus sort of lock-in and value capture. But what's interesting is that if something like interchain security really takes off, which it sounds like it will, it ends up looking in a lot of ways similar to something like Polkadot or Ethereum, but instead it's more of an opt-in security model versus a forced security model. One quick question, because I know Alex has a couple other questions, but how are you thinking about sort of EVM compatibility? We talk a lot about on the show about how there seems to be two different ecosystems forming right now. There's sort of the EVM compatible chains and then the non-EVM compatible chains, like Solana. And so we're seeing almost two separate, it's almost like two competing ideologies in a way. Where do you guys think about EVM compatibility? I know I believe there's a Cosmos chain with EVM compatibility being built, if not already. Just kind of curious where you think about that, I guess, ideology.
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. So at Cosmos, our ideology is generally multi-chain maximalism, right? So we'd love to see more projects that use Solana, more projects that use Solidity, more projects that use smart contracts with, that are maybe even built on CosmWasm, right? Which is maybe considered one of the more native Cosmos smart contract platforms. So who uses CosmWasm, right? So Terra uses CosmWasm. Juno, a recently launched, community run chain, uses CosmWasm. A chain that we're incubating here at Tendermint called Archway uses CosmWasm. And we expect, blockchains with different smart contract platforms to be able to interoperate over time as well. So on the EVM front, right, there is a chain that's being built. There's in fact two chains being built that interact with this. So the first one of which I believe launching a little bit sooner is called the Gravity Bridge blockchain. It's built by this team called Althea, which has been funded primarily from the Interchain Foundation. And they're launching a chain, like a three-way bridge that is planning to connect Polkadot to Cosmos, and from Cosmos to Polkadot. Wait, what am I saying? This is the wrong chain. It'll connect Polygon to Cosmos, Cosmos to Polygon, Polygon to Ethereum, Ethereum to Cosmos, and forms a triangle right from there. So that's super exciting, and I believe it's launching soon, maybe even this month. I need to talk to the Althea team again, but this is meant to launch soon, and it's a great way for people to bring their Ethereum assets and ERC20 tokens from Polygon and Ethereum over to Cosmos. And I believe they have ambitions to bridge even more, EVM-enabled chains like Binance Chain and beyond through this bridge.
That's interesting to hear. So one last question, because I know does if a new chain is launching, maybe not with the Tendermint consensus, but they're at least bridging into sort of the Cosmos hub, is that enough of a connection for your team to sort of help support the new projects? How are you guys thinking about that in terms of, I guess, the degree of like collaboration that a project is, for example, using Cosmos?
Yeah, if you can just hold that thought for a minute. I forgot to mention Evmos as well.
Okay.
So Evmos is that second blockchain project focused on the Ethereum virtual machine. So what it is the EVM, it is Solidity smart contracts built on top of Tendermint core consensus, built on top of the Cosmos SDK that has IBC enabled. So this technology is built by the ThorChain team, by Fetch.ai, who's an ex-employee here at Tendermint. And this technology is already being used for 2 different chains. So crypto.com, which has a Cosmos blockchain, is building another blockchain called Chronos. So both Chronos and Evmos both use the same IBC-enabled EVM technology. So that's really exciting to hear about. And I believe they're also in the process of launching either now or in Q1. So, like I said before, we're really unopinionated. We'd love to see activity on, EVM-related projects, because those exist in Cosmos as well. And those assets can come to Cosmos, and our assets can move on to, Polygon and Ethereum and Binance Chain as well. It's really meant to all connect together.
So Peng, we've talked a lot about your role as the CEO of Tendermint, but you've also recently joined the advisory council at Prophecy DeFi, which is obviously a company that Andrew and I are very intimately familiar with and involved with. Can you tell us why? What was your interest in that business?
Yeah, so my interest in Prophecy DeFi is very similar to my interest in crypto as a whole, right? I came into this space in 2015 to bring crypto to everyone, right? To embed this technology underpinning everything that we do as a civilization. And that means, being able to communicate properly and educating people into the value of this technology. And I believe Prophecy DeFi does a lot of that, right? When it comes to, connecting people who have lots of interest in the crypto, but may not have the time to understand, how it works. As a core developer, as our company is a core developer of Cosmos, we're involved in many different Cosmos ecosystem projects. We're involved in bridging other ecosystems to Cosmos and to help those ecosystems to bridge to each other, right? Even without going through the Cosmos hub. So we're all about bringing this technology together and giving people as much access to it as possible. And being a part of the advisory council of Prophecy DeFi means I'm able to answer questions and help people understand the current landscape of, where multi-chain is going, the various ways that people can get involved and be a part of these new technologies, be a part of these new communities, and have a say in how they're developed. So those are things I'm all passionate about, and I'm happy to spread that knowledge to as many people as possible.
Well, we're happy to have you involved as well, of course. Andrew?
Yeah, so one project that we've sort of spoken a lot, and I think makes a lot of sense, kind of given the synergies between the two and both kind of ethos, and is Polygon. And last week we were talking about the Polygon SDK, which my project, actually, SX Network, is going to be the first chain launching using it. Is sort of integration with the Polygon community something on the roadmap for sort of the Cosmos and Tendermint team, and as well as like other projects like Avalanche and so on?
Yeah, so that's a wonderful question. So aside from helping Cosmos SDK projects launch, we have a deep interest in connecting ecosystems together, right? So that means that you should definitely reach out if you have some ideas to bridge the Cosmos ecosystem to the Polygon ecosystem, right? There's the Polygon SDK, which is actually built on Tendermint Core, and then the Cosmos SDK, which is also built on Tendermint Core. So it does feel like must be an easy way to connect the two. And because Polygon is building, their own sort of internet of blockchains, it makes a lot of sense for all these chains to permissionlessly connect to each other. And I would be, extremely happy to see that happen. I believe at a high level, right, some of this bridging might get started already with the Gravity Bridge chain I mentioned earlier by Althea that connects Polygon mainnet, right, and the ERC20 and Matic tokens on Polygon mainnet over to Cosmos, and from there to Ethereum, etc. But I think the idea of the Polygon SDK and chains that use that is brilliant, and I would love to see that interoperate with everything else.
I was thinking about your analogy an analogy for interchain security. This idea that there's sort of a blanket protection of sorts that allows new entrepreneurial projects to launch. And it reminded me sort of like, in a mature democratic capitalist system, you might put a store on the road, and the road is connected to electrical and plumbing, and it also has a police force, and there's a court system, and there's a rule of law, and there's all this sort of embedded security that makes launching a business much easier. There's still risk. Obviously, people might not walk into your storefront. You might fail to execute on your strategy, but there's all of this implied security and implied infrastructure that exists. And I sort of think of these blockchain protocols in the same way, this is I'm not the first person to talk about it this way. Ethan actually mentioned on a previous DeFi Decoded, the idea of these things as being like whole economies. And, for some of these bigger projects like Cosmos, there are these whole economies where applications can launch and still benefit from all of the other work that's come before. In the same way that, in a mature economy, any business builder or entrepreneur can try their hand at launching a company knowing that they have all of this implied infrastructure. And I really like the idea of inverting the concept of value capture to value creation, right? It's more like, instead of trying to get a bigger piece of the DeFi pie, how do we grow the whole pie? And if we grow the whole pie, then the project with the best tech and the best community should stand to benefit as well. And I also love the idea of multi-chain maximalism. And this has sort of been, Andrew's been harping on this for a while, which is this whole idea that, block space is going to be the most scarce resource. And there is no single chain that's going to be able to support all of the things that I think people like me certainly hope blockchain can achieve. And you alluded to that earlier, which is, this isn't just about creating a new playground for millionaires and institutions to trade assets like Wall Street 2.0. This is about democratizing finance as much as it is about decentralizing finance. I thought that was a great point as well. And I also want to address this idea of airdrops. So you talk about all these different projects that are launching. And, if you're an Atom holder and you're staking your tokens to a validator, typically that's enough to allow you to participate in a lot of these airdrops like Osmosis and Juno and others. And I almost wonder, it's basically like being a Cosmos holder and staking your tokens gives you a seat at the table where you can participate in this flow of promising new ventures. And that almost strikes me as a more sustainable form of value creation than the idea of, you need to use my native token to pay gas on a trade, because that's going away at some point, right? And I think that the idea of, you want to have a seat at the table where you can capture a stream of new and exciting ideas and projects seems like a more sustainable way to think about how to build value in the long term. So anyway, I just want to say that was a really great discussion. Peng and Andrew, some awesome questions, unsurprisingly. Where can people learn more about Tendermint and what you're doing?
Yep. So I love Twitter. And we use Twitter a lot to talk about what we're doing as a company and how the ecosystem is growing. So, I think even more important than following, Tendermint HQ on Twitter or following the ZC Peng on Twitter, which is my handle, you should follow Cosmos on Twitter. Cosmos is super unopinionated, and it's really about supporting, like Alex said, which resonates a lot with me, the growth of value and the growth of new projects in the Cosmos ecosystem. You'll find that in the Cosmos community, we are, very supportive of new projects, to an extent that is, encouraging new projects to airdrop tokens directly to the Atom holder set, because there's really no other token holder set currently that cares as much about growing the internet of blockchains as a set of Atom holders.
Well, an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we could keep going, but we'll call it there. Peng, thanks for joining us. Andrew, as always, that concludes today's episode of DeFi Decoded. Check out Tendermint on Twitter and check out DeFi Decoded on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening to it here, you probably already know it exists. Anyway, take care, everyone. We'll see you next week.
The information contained herein does not constitute an offer or solicitation by anyone in the United States or in any other jurisdiction in which such an offer or solicitation is not authorized, or to any person to whom it is unlawful to make such an offer or solicitation. Prospective investors who are not residents in Canada should contact their financial advisor to determine whether securities of the funds may be lawfully sold in their jurisdiction.